Confidence always comes first. Never panic. Shops stay full while banks remain open and headlines insist everything is under control. But somewhere quietly, the numbers stop making sense. A century ago, Berlin saw a woman carrying her life savings in a basket of cash. And by the time she reached the store, bread's price had tripled. Rome melted silver coins to make cheaper ones, while Zimbabwe's trillion-dollar notes piled up in gutters, and Argentina's salaries rose faster than calendars could keep up. Every time the same illusion appears, that money is permanent. Every time the same ending follows, it isn't. Yet in every collapse, a few saw the pattern early. They didn't hoard, but converted, turning paper into things the system couldn't erase, like land and metals and art, value that breathes. History remembers them not as prophets, but as survivors, and today their pattern is visible again. So before we talk about what to buy, we must understand why value dies, because this is empire economics, where history whispers warnings and those who listen endure. Picture this scene from November 1923 Berlin, where a woman wheels a massive cart overflowing with paper money through the streets, enough banknotes to fill a bathtub. She's not heading to buy a mansion or a luxury car, but desperately trying to purchase a single loaf of bread before the price doubles again by evening. Just hours later, children are seen using stacks of German marks as building blocks because the paper was more valuable as kindling than currency. This isn't fiction, but what happens when money dies? Throughout history, civilizations have faced moments when their currency transforms from trusted medium of exchange into worthless paper overnight. And in those crucial hours, those who understood what truly held value survived and even thrived, while millions of others watched their life savings evaporate like morning mist. The survivors' stories weren't accidents, but the result of recognizing patterns that repeat across centuries, patterns that most people never see until it's too late. Every empire and every nation and every monetary system eventually reaches a breaking point where the signs are always there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who know how to read them. From ancient Rome's silver coins to modern fiat currencies, the script follows the same devastating arc. Governments print more money to fund their expenses, and citizens notice prices rising but assume it's temporary. Then suddenly and catastrophically, trust collapses and currency becomes confetti. But here's what history books rarely tell you. In every single monetary collapse, certain items became more valuable than gold itself, and these weren't luxury goods or exotic investments, but simple, practical things that smart people quietly accumulated while everyone else trusted in paper promises. The survivors of Weimar Germany knew this secret, while the people who weathered Zimbabwe's hyperinflation understood it, and today, as global debt reaches unprecedented levels and central banks create money at speeds that would make ancient emperors blush, these lessons have never been more relevant. Before we continue, though, understanding what actually holds value when currency collapses diverges sharply from what financial advisors tell you. Real wealth protection requires studying historical collapse patterns, so hit that subscribe button because it helps the channel, and these monetary crisis lessons need spreading. Drop a comment too, because I want knowing which warning sign worries you most. Following World War I, the German government faced impossible reparation payments and a collapsing economy, and their solution seemed logical: print more money to pay their bills. At first, the inflation was manageable and almost unnoticeable. Early 1922 saw 160 German marks buying $1 as citizens grumbled about rising prices, but continued with their daily lives, trusting that their government would restore stability. But what happened next would change history forever. By November 1923, just 20 months later, it took 4.2 trillion marks to buy that same dollar. Prices weren't just rising, but doubling every 2 days as workers demanded being paid twice daily because their morning wages couldn't buy lunch by afternoon. Restaurants stopped printing menus because prices changed faster than ink could dry, while banks closed their doors not from runs on deposits, but because the cost of counting worthless money exceeded its value. During this chaos, something remarkable happened. While most Germans watched their savings disappear, a small group of people had prepared differently by converting their marks into tangible goods months earlier, recognizing the warning signs that others ignored. These weren't wealthy aristocrats with insider knowledge, but ordinary citizens who understood a simple truth. When money fails, human needs remain constant. Food became the ultimate currency, where farmers found themselves wealthier than bankers as desperate city dwellers traded family heirlooms for sacks of grain. A single egg could buy what once cost hundreds of marks, and those who had stockpiled basic necessities discovered they possessed more real wealth than people holding millions in paper currency. The lesson was brutal but clear. In monetary collapse, the hierarchy of value inverts completely. Zimbabwe's pattern repeated decades later, where monthly inflation reached an incomprehensible 79.6 billion% in 2008. Citizens watched prices doubling every 24 hours, making long-term planning impossible, and the government printed $100 trillion notes that couldn't buy a loaf of bread. But again, certain people had prepared by quietly accumulating items, retaining value regardless of currency strength. Tools and medicine and fuel, and especially food. These weren't random choices because throughout every monetary crisis in recorded history, the same categories of goods maintain their value while paper money disintegrates. Human beings need to eat and stay healthy and maintain their possessions regardless of economic conditions. A hammer remains useful whether you pay for it with gold coins or worthless paper, while medicine saves lives whether the economy is booming or collapsing, and food sustains families whether inflation is 2% or 2,000%. But understanding what to acquire is only half the equation because timing matters enormously. German citizens who converted their savings in early 1922 preserved their wealth, while those who waited until 1923 lost everything. The key lies in recognizing warning signs before they become obvious to everyone else. When governments begin printing money to fund their operations, and when debt levels reach unsustainable ratios, and when trust in institutions starts to waver, these are the signals that history has taught us to watch for. Today, the same pattern unfolds again, but most people can't see it because they've never studied the warning signs. Central banks across the developed world have created more money in the past 15 years than in the previous century combined. And government debt levels have reached ratios that historically preceded every major monetary crisis. Yet citizens continue placing faith in paper promises just as Germans did in 1922 and just as Zimbabweans did in the early 2000s. The mathematics are inescapable. When the United States government spends nearly $2 trillion more than it collects each year, and when federal debt approaches 100% of the entire economy's output, and when other nations begin questioning the dollar's role as the world's reserve currency, these aren't abstract numbers, but the same warning signs that preceded every currency collapse in recorded history. The only difference is scale, because this time the entire global financial system is built on the same shaky foundation. But here's what makes this moment both dangerous and opportunity-filled. Unlike previous collapses that affected single nations or regions, today's interconnected world means the next monetary crisis will be global. That sounds terrifying, and it should, but it also means the lessons from history are more valuable than ever, because while most people will be caught unprepared, those who understand these patterns can protect themselves and their families. Survivors throughout history shared common strategies that transcend time and geography. They recognize that true wealth isn't measured in currency units, but in the ability to meet human needs regardless of economic conditions. And they understood that when paper money fails, people still require the basics of survival and comfort. Most importantly, they acted on this knowledge before the crisis became obvious to everyone else. Food remains the most fundamental store of value during currency collapse. Not exotic superfoods or gourmet ingredients, but basic staples forming the foundation of human nutrition, like rice and beans and canned vegetables and preserved meats, become more precious than gold when supply chains break down and prices spiral beyond reach. A 50-pound bag of rice costing $30 today could feed a family for months when bread costs thousands of dollars per loaf. Water represents an even more critical concern that most people never consider until it's too late. Modern societies take clean drinking water for granted, but when economic systems collapse, water treatment facilities often fail or become unreliable, and the ability to purify and store water becomes essential for survival. Simple items like water filters and purification tablets and storage containers transform from convenience products into life-saving necessities. Medicine and basic healthcare supplies follow the same principle. When currency loses value, the cost of prescription medications and medical care can become prohibitive overnight, but common medications and first aid supplies and basic medical equipment maintain their life-saving value regardless of economic conditions. A bottle of antibiotics or pain relievers costing $20 today could become priceless when the same items cost thousands in devalued currency. Tools and repair items round out the essential categories because when complex supply chains break down, the ability to maintain and repair possessions becomes invaluable. Basic hand tools and fasteners and duct tape and simple mechanical parts allow people to keep functioning when replacement goods become unavailable or unaffordable. Energy sources matter tremendously because modern life depends on electricity and heating and cooking fuel. Portable generators and fuel storage and alternative cooking methods and heating solutions become critical when infrastructure fails or energy costs skyrocket beyond affordability. The pattern is clear across all these categories. Items that meet basic human needs retain value regardless of what happens to paper currency, and the time to acquire them is before everyone else realizes their importance. Survivors of every monetary collapse weren't the ones who trusted most in their government's promises, but the ones who recognized the patterns first, who understood that true wealth lies not in paper, but in things that meet human needs regardless of what's printed on currency. Knowledge is the ultimate preparation, while understanding is the greatest protection. The warning signs are visible today for those willing to look. Unprecedented money creation and unsustainable debt levels and eroding trust in institutions and rising inflation that governments insist is temporary. These are the same signals that preceded Weimar Germany and Zimbabwe and Argentina and countless other collapses throughout history. The question isn't whether the pattern will repeat, but when, and whether you'll be among those who prepared or among those who trusted paper promises until it was too late. Thanks for watching. Here's what I want. Knowing from you, though, if you could only stockpile one category of survival goods before currency collapse, would you prioritize food for its immediate necessity, water for its life-sustaining properties, or medicine for its potential to save lives when healthcare systems fail? That choice determines whether you survive the first weeks of collapse or whether you become desperate enough to trade everything for basics you should have acquired earlier. So drop your take in the comments because I genuinely want hearing which category you think matters most. If this content helped you understand how history and money intertwine, subscribe to Empire Economics for more untold stories because the next collapse is coming, and those who study history will be the ones who endure it.